Coaching hires around the NFL can tell us a lot of things, including who the New Orleans Saints' biggest competition might be in the Derek Carr sweepstakes. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credential member of the media, CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. On today's episode, we're going to take a look at some late round quarterbacks that might be worth taking a flyer on, including some undrafted free agent prospects to know. We'll also get to some of the early round not mock drafts, but early round quarterbacks in the NFL draft that you need to know, the ones that could have an impact for the New Orleans Saints. But first, are the New York Jets the biggest piece of competition thus far for the New Orleans Saints in what we'll call Derek Carr watch, right? The Derek Carr sweepstakes, if you will. If the New Orleans Saints are still interested in Derek Carr, they're certainly interested enough to have him come and visit for a couple of days. He and his wife spent some time here in New Orleans, but if for any reason they weren't, then obviously the Saints could already move on and start to look at some of the other options that they would have in free agency and in trades, things like that. If you're interested in some of those options, I discussed them in yesterday's episode, so you can go and check those out. But I want to start off here with the biggest competition if the New Orleans Saints are still interested. Remember, Derek Carr has now said that he will veto, or he's not waiving his no trade clause. He won't be traded, which means that basically in the next 48 hours, you can expect Derek Carr to become a free agent, at which time he can then sign immediately with any team that he decides he wants to work with. And that can come down to scheme, fit, familiarity, money, all of that. So that's where the New York Jets come in. Because right now, the New Orleans Saints are kind of widely considered the front runners when it comes to Derek Carr at the moment. That doesn't seem very likely to me, at least at this time, but that's kind of just me, right? I'm looking at it from the perspective of, well, he didn't like New Orleans enough to be traded there. Was that really just despite the Las Vegas Raiders, or is there something else there, right? And so Derek Carr, I've seen a lot of people suggest that there's some behind closed doors handshake between Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints organization. They've already sort of talked about a price, and that he basically just went back to Las Vegas and said, no, not letting you trade me. And then he's just going to walk here to New Orleans from Las Vegas directly and walk into the airline highway facility and say, okay, I'm ready to sign my contract now. And I just don't think that that's really the case. I think he's going to go and, his representation is going to want him to go and see how much money he can get, because the more money Derek Carr gets, the more money his representation gets. We have to remember that it's not just one person's decision in all of this, that he's going to have a lot of people around him saying, no, go and visit more teams, go and see what else they have to offer, go and drive your price up, go and drive your market up, all this other stuff. So for the New York Jets, one of the things that I think signals a potential interest from them in Derek Carr, in addition to Aaron Rodgers, right? There's a lot of reports out there saying that the New York Jets' number one option is Aaron Rodgers, but this recent move that they've just made in bringing in Todd Downing, the former Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator, hired him fresh off a DUI, brought him in to be the New York Jets sort of pass game coordinator. So now they've got Nathaniel Hackett there, and they've got Todd Downing there. And a lot of folks are kind of looking at that combination saying, okay, well, there's some Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers crossover there. There's kind of a little bit of Todd Downing system that makes sense in terms of his coaching tree, who he's worked with, that would make sense for Aaron Rodgers. But I'm looking at the immediate connection between Todd Downing and another soon-to-be free agent quarterback, and that's Derek Carr. You see, Todd Downing was the 2015-2016 season quarterback coach with Derek Carr, so his second season and his third season in Oakland, and then which of course before they moved to Las Vegas, and then he became the then Oakland Raiders offensive coordinator for 2017. And so the reason why I point that out is that with Todd Downing now over in New York and the New York Jets already having a good amount of cap space to spend, they're sitting right now just $3 million under the salary cap. A lot of that stuff will get cleared up. They'll have a ton of money that they're going to be able to move around. And if they have the money for Aaron Rodgers, then they certainly have the money for Derek Carr, for instance. You look back to Derek Carr's 2015, 16, and 17. Those are 3 of his 4 Pro Bowl seasons. His most recent Pro Bowl season, of course, being 2002, after, he made it along with like Tyler Huntley after alternative after alternative after alternative and injury after injury after injury and all that. But 2015, 16, and 17, he was an outright Pro Bowler those 3 seasons. And those 3 seasons, Todd Downing was a big part of what he was doing. So now I look at the New York Jets, who are very clearly desperate for a quarterback, and to figure out that situation over there. They have a really, really solid team. Right now, FanDuel has them up above the New Orleans Saints for Super Bowl odds going into 2023. And the Saints, by the way, are plus 3,500 in those odds. I'm trying to grab the Jets odds as well. But I think, you look at kind of where they are. They have Garrett Wilson. They'll have Breece Hall coming back. They have a really good defense that's coming together over there with, of course, Sauce Gardner, who, has been playing lights out and everything throughout his rookie season. The Jets right now are plus 2,500. So they're just outside. They're just within the top half of the league, while the Saints are just outside the top half of the league. And so, you look at everything that the Jets have to offer, and they do have a lot to offer, including potentially more money than what the New Orleans Saints may be able to offer as well. But the fact of the matter is that, like, the contract money's all fake. It doesn't matter. You can get kicked down the road. It can be restructured. It can be moved. It can go into bonuses. Those bonuses can be restructured. Like, there's so much stuff to all that, like, to make the insinuation that any team can afford more than what the New Orleans Saints can afford is just kind of like short-sighted, because anyone can afford anything in the NFL under the salary cap. If the last 2 seasons of New Orleans Saints football haven't taught you that already, then certainly this one, I guess, will. Maybe 3 years is what it takes. But I do think that Todd Downing hire by the New York Jets is significant, and it's one that does position the Jets uniquely in terms of having the Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers connection, but also now the Todd Downing, Derek Carr connection, so that they have their ability to be able to court either one of those quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers' dark retreat is said to be extended. We'll see how much longer that goes. Maybe the longer that goes, the better for the New Orleans Saints, because until Aaron Rodgers hits the market, it doesn't seem like the Jets are ready to pounce on anything. And so if Derek Carr hits the market, the Saints really don't have to wait. They have to be under the salary cap by the new league year, but they can come to contract terms and then immediately start restructuring contract after contract, and then, move on and have their next quarterback. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways that the Saints can get this done, but there is going to be competition when it comes to Derek Carr. And I think that people are kind of sleeping on that a little bit. And so if you're one of the Saints fans that really wants Derek Carr in New Orleans and sees value in Derek Carr, things continue to get a little bit more complicated in him vetoing the trade. Now this Todd Downing hire, the Jets uniquely positioning themselves to be competition with the New Orleans Saints. And then who else is the competition, right? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be looking for a quarterback. The Carolina Panthers are going to be looking for a quarterback. There's some rumors that the Atlanta Falcons could be looking for a quarterback, even though they invested in Desmond Ridder, but they didn't invest highly. So it gives them the freedom to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do at quarterback. You wait to see what the New England Patriots are going to do. You wait to see what some of these other QB needy teams are going to do. There's going to be a lot of competition around the New Orleans Saints, but we'll see exactly how it all pans out. But just watch out for the New York Jets here and hope that the Aaron Rodgers dark retreat continues to retreat a little bit longer, right? Extending that sort of everyone else waiting while the New Orleans Saints can go ahead and make a move, unless they want to wait around and see if Aaron Rodgers is going to be interested as well. Interesting. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at how the New Orleans Saints can address quarterback in the draft by looking at each round and sort of the cloud of quarterbacks that make sense at each of the New Orleans Saints draft positions. We're going to break all that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's show brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. BetterHelp Therapy Online is awesome. I use it. They make it super easy, super convenient, and not a situation to where you have to like deal with traffic and deal with waiting rooms and being around people if you don't want to be, right? Like part of my like counseling stuff and therapy stuff is like social anxiety, believe it or not. It's easy to talk to a camera, not easy necessarily being around a bunch of people sometimes. And so like sitting in a waiting room just doesn't really make sense for me because I'm already nervous about my appointment, all these other things. So I don't have to worry about any of that when it comes to BetterHelp. It's convenient, it's flexible, it's affordable, and it's entirely online, meaning you can do it through video chat, you could do it over the phone, you could do it just through messages as well. It's awesome. And you fill out a quick questionnaire, they get you set up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time without any additional charge. They make it that easy and that convenient for you. They don't need you to come in and spend a bunch of money. They want you to come in and be your best self. So live a more empowered life. If you want to do that, therapy can help get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. The New Orleans Saints would benefit from an early round quarterback. When I'm talking about an early round quarterback, you know what I'm talking about. Round 1, round 2. That's the space where you can usually win when it comes to these quarterbacks. Let's start off with the ones that make sense for the New Orleans Saints. We'll start off with a trade-up scenario, but then also take a look at if the Saints stood pat at 29. And that kind of cloud around 29 is also the same cloud that's around 40 as well. So we would to consolidate this a little bit and get a little bit beyond before we jump into like day 3 stuff and undrafted free agent options, which we'll get to close the show out. So let's say that the New Orleans Saints trade up in round 1. And look, the NFL draft is unpredictable, right? As we look at these clouds, we're talking about where players are projected on February 13th/February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. People are going to rise. Some people are going to fall. The combine's going to help some people. The combine's going to hurt some people. This is all going to change. But this just gives you a little bit of an early glimpse at the clouds of quarterbacks that make sense for the New Orleans Saints. So should they trade up? And that means if they trade up to the middle of the round, or if they trade up inside the top 10 and give up this year's first, next year's first, this year's second, next year's second, move all the way up and more, move all the way up to be able to make sure that they get somebody that dropped out of the top 5 or whatever. That cloud of trade up potential players includes Florida Gators quarterback Anthony Richardson, Kentucky quarterback Will Levis, and of course, Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud. Now, CJ Stroud's very likely going to be one, 2, or 3, right? Like teams are going to trade up into the top of this, or at least, you know what? Like that's what we expected last year too. Like there was a lot of people who were saying that, oh, there aren't any first round quarterbacks. And there were a lot of people who were saying, no, there are because they're quarterbacks and therefore there are first round quarterbacks. And maybe you look at it the same way this time. You think maybe some people will fall out of the top 5 and others will tell you, no, they won't. Who knows? Nobody knows. So with that being the case, what we know right now is that Bryce Young is very likely the first quarterback off the board. Again, early. We'll see how that changes. So for the Saints, if you get the option between CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis, I think you lean CJ Stroud, but I understand if you like Anthony Richardson and you like Will Levis. If you like Josh Allen, then you like Anthony Richardson. If you like Jalen Hurts, who you just saw, play his heart out in a Super Bowl, an unfortunate loss for Jalen Hurts, great win for Patrick Mahomes, then you probably like the tools that Anthony Richardson is working with as well. That all makes sense. And so when I look at these guys and I kind of, try to highlight what it is that they do well, where it is that they still need to grow, there's any number of things that you can list. But let's start with CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud for the New Orleans Saints would be a really, really excellent fit. He's somebody that's above average, in particular in like the short and intermediate areas, and then does pretty well in the perimeter, particularly over to the left side of the field. So if that's going to be your, you taking your deep shots to Chris Olave, all of that, then great. But if you're just looking at somebody that's also going to be able to operate this offense in a West Coast style, short intermediate area, and then take the deep shots when they become available, then CJ Stroud's your guy. He makes a ton of sense there. Not as great over the middle of the field beyond about 10 to 15 yards, but something that you can easily work on and then get him caught up into today's NFL and all that. Incredibly accurate passer. Does need to get some work in terms of getting better under pressure, all of that. He's going to be somebody that can stand in the pocket and deliver for you, but he's got the legs to be able to get things done if he's in trouble. Anthony Richardson, on the other hand, really, really good over the middle of the field, short to, or intermediate to deep area. Not so great in terms of the deep ball accuracy, but has a huge arm. If you can clean that up a little bit, then you've got him going. It's like almost exactly what Josh Allen dealt with throughout his career. He's got every physical attribute that you could want from a quarterback, just needs to get a little bit more of the sort of like fundamental pieces under his, in his foundation. That becomes the next step for a guy like Anthony Richardson. If he's able to do that, then all of a sudden he becomes a pretty interesting prospect. But do you trust that this is the coaching staff that's going to be able to get him there? Or is that something you kind of have questions about? I understand either way. Will Levis, on the other hand, really, really good out on the perimeter, really, really good, in the middle of the field, not so great when it comes to the perimeter. So he's somebody that really attacks the middle of the field for you. That works in today's NFL. That's exactly what you're looking for. Short, intermediate, whatever. But he's really, really good downfield. Let me see if I have his deep ball, deep yards, 551 deep yards in 2022. So not bad at all. He also had like 8.6 yards in terms of his average depth, and he had a 2.3 big throw percentage. So like pretty respectable numbers in terms of what you're looking for a guy to translate to the NFL. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that Kentucky misused him in 2022. Once Liam Cohen left Kentucky and came out to Los Angeles, well, I'm not in Los Angeles anymore, went out to Los Angeles to the Rams, and then the new regime took over at Kentucky, they kind of stuck Will Levis in a situation where he had to pass from the pocket and didn't really utilize his legs, didn't really utilize his mobility, minus 100 plus yards in rushing. Because remember, they removed the sack yards in college for some reason. And so not exactly able to be the player that he should have been able to be. And so expect that to change when he gets to the NFL and him being a little bit more of a dual threat guy. Okay, so those are potential fits for you if the Saints were to trade up. If the Saints were to stand pat at 29 or wait to the second round, really the cloud is the same. Hendon Hooker, Tanner McKee. Those are really your guys. Tanner McKee's an interesting one because it kind of depends upon who you're talking to, the Stanford quarterback. I don't fully buy it, but there are people that I really trust that buy it, so I'm kind of struggling with that. I don't want to dive into the groupthink thing there, but when there's enough people saying like, hey, this guy is a really good prospect, and I'm sitting there going, word? Then I'm okay questioning myself and saying, well, maybe I should look back at the tape. But every time I look back at the tape, I find the same issues and I find the same things that I'm kind of concerned with, is that he's just kind of one of those toolsy kind of guys that kind of gets it done, but doesn't fully get it done. And he's a little bit of an overachiever. And I don't like that tag when it comes to quarterbacks. I don't like that tag when it comes to getting somebody to translate over to the NFL. But does he throw on time? Yes. Does he throw accurately? 100%. Is he a pocket guy that can run a West Coast offense? Absolutely. Just don't let him get under pressure. And then, that way the wheels don't fall off. When it comes to Hendon Hooker, he's probably my favorite quarterback in this class in terms of a realistic mock-up for the New Orleans Saints. I know a lot of people are worried about the Josh Heupel system and sort of that, how that translates to the NFL. And I think it translates really well because it means that he's a spot thrower and he's a great pre-snap quarterback. You just want to get him out of the habit of, as soon as he feels pressure, running. I think you need to get him to a point to where you get to sort of the Drew Brees kind of, I'm going to take a step over this way, extend the play a little bit, keep my eyes downfield, and still deliver based on the play call as opposed to immediately bailing on the run. But that's the difference between being in a one-read system or a quick read system like he was in Tennessee, and then getting to a full list of progressions that he has to go to in the NFL. That's something that every quarterback has to get better at when they enter the NFL game anyway. So I'm not worried about that potentially translating or not translating when it comes to landing here in New Orleans. Round 3, there's not really anybody that hits round 3. And there's this big gap in between like those 5 or 6 quarterbacks and then the next group of quarterbacks that are really the late round, sort of day 3. I guess take a flyer on them maybe if you want to. Round 3 could be a Hendon Hooker place depending upon his medicals, could be a Tanner McKee place depending upon how NFL scouts feel about him versus the way that media might feel about him, things like that. So let's take a look at the day 3 guys that might be worth a flyer and the undrafted free agent potential that's out there that the New Orleans Saints could look at after the draft, as well as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, then you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know that a lot of folks have set goals to eat a little healthier this year, and that's where Built Bar comes in and is awesome, because with Built, you're getting something that's actually healthy and tasty all at the same time. And seriously, they're so delicious, you won't even know that you're eating something that's good for you. That makes them perfect for your New Year's resolution, which I know you're trying to keep kicking here midway through February. So you can find them over at built.com, but also you can get them now at your local Walmart and Sam's Club as well. So you can head over to Walmart today, head to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars, get a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate or coconut puffs. And if you're near a Sam's Club, you can go there and get a 13-bar box, the Baker's Dozen, getting yourself the hit flavors like brownie batter as well as churro. Don't worry, you can thank me later. Go and check them out today. It's Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the market. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with some of the late round, maybe even undrafted guys that the Saints could take a bit of a flyer on when it comes to signal caller. Now, you're probably tired of me saying this, but I'm just going to truncate it in case you haven't heard me say it before. Round 3 and beyond is not a good place to take a quarterback in the NFL draft. Those quarterback prospects are not round 1, round 2 quarterback prospects for an absolute reason. 1 out of 75 over the last 10 years is an actual starting quarterback in the NFL. It's Dak Prescott. Okay. Got that off my chest. It's my usual disclaimer. Get used to it. I'm going to bring it up a few times here throughout the offseason, but let's take a look. Round 4. The cloud around round 4 is going to be Purdue quarterback Aiden O'Connell, as well as Fresno State quarterback Jake Haener. Jake Haener had undoubtedly the best time at the Senior Bowl out of any quarterback that was there, but that's not saying much because there wasn't a lot of positives for the quarterbacks this year at the Senior Bowl, despite the fact that they had incredibly good offensive line play all throughout. This group of passers just wasn't the group of passers that we've seen at the Senior Bowl in Mobile in the past. Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue. I understand people get really enticed by the Purdue helmet and the Drew Brees, nostalgia and all that other stuff. But this is a situation where I just simply don't see it. This is a guy that's coming in undersized, that's coming in without a big arm, that's coming in without an inability to really feel pressure, moves himself into sacks very often, can't create on his own. And as you're seeing now in today's NFL, that's just not the guy that you want under center. Jake Haener is that guy, but 5'11", 5'10". So not great. Same issues, but does have a pretty good arm. But again, there are these phrases that we hear all the time. It doesn't have NFL caliber size, doesn't have NFL caliber arm, but, and I'm getting rid of the but now. We're no longer talking about somebody that's coming in to potentially learn behind Drew Brees for 2 or 3 years and then become the New Orleans Saints' new starting quarterback. If you're drafting a quarterback right now without a bona fide starter on your roster, which is the case at the moment, right? Might not be the case when we get to the NFL draft, but the case at the moment, you're not going for the guy that's not NFL size, that doesn't have an NFL arm, but can do these other things. You're looking for the guy that has the NFL size, the NFL caliber arm, and can do the other things. And neither Aiden O'Connell nor Jake Haener are that guy. Round 5 cloud is probably more like Clayton Tune, Max Duggan. I love Max Duggan. He's a freaking gamer. That dude has gone through so much and has been able to overcome all of it, get back out on the field, sent the TCU Horned Frogs to a national championship game, got completely decimated by the Georgia Bulldogs, but that was to be expected. But you know what you didn't expect? The TCU Horned Frogs to be in that game in the first place by the time the season began. The guy that kind of made that happen is Max Duggan. He's a big part of why they had their success. So you love the resume, all of that. You love the drive. He has some things that he can do over the course of the combine and everything that will allow him to maybe raise his stock a little bit. But as of right now, he's still a day 3 guy. Clayton Tune's right there too. Clayton Tune had a pretty good day at the All-Star games as well, but not really anybody that's going to really move the needle for you at all. Round 6 and 7, I'll kind of group these together because there's really only one other potentially draftable quarterback in this class, and it's BYU's Jaren Hall. He came in a shade over 6 foot in Mobile. That was big for him because one of the big question marks was does he have the size? And is he going to be somebody that, can, again, Is he NFL caliber size? Is he an NFL caliber arm? Like, no, he's not really those things. Although I think he does have an NFL caliber arm. I really do. I think that he's somebody that can make all three levels. He can make just about every throw on the field. The issue is that like the inaccuracy pops up, the inconsistency pops up. His timeliness getting through progressions is a little slow. He has to be able to pick that up. Ow. Sorry, I hit my hand. And all of that. And so I think that there's like enough of the mechanic stuff that you need to improve. That means that he's not NFL ready right now, but he could get there. Like he's somebody that could develop into that. He's probably just not going to be a day one starter for you. So, but if you're looking for a day one starter, let's just be real. You're not finding one beyond Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. I mean, Hendon Hooker could be that guy, but it depends on his health. Depends on how quickly he's able to get into the rhythm of reading a full field, all that other stuff, like all those things that you have to be able to work on with just about any of these prospects. Like he could be that guy, but you don't necessarily want him to be that guy or even need him to be that guy, honestly. Like Hendon Hooker is the guy that you draft and say, okay, sit for 6 weeks and we'll get you ready. Undrafted free agents. There are a couple here that I think are interesting. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, DTR out of UCLA. I actually like this guy's game. I think the biggest sort of like conundrum, if you will, when it comes to his game is just like, what are his measurements actually going to look like by the time that he's like showing up for the combine or showing up for whatever? At UCLA, he measured in at 6'1", 205 pounds. He's an accurate thrower, 69.6% completion percentage last year, 27 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. That's not bad at all. And he's a dual threat guy, all of that. Look at his like rushing yards for the season and all that. He's able to create with his legs. He's able to push the ball downfield. He's able to do a lot of stuff. So he's an exciting guy, but honestly, I don't know if he gets drafted. Because the fundamentals of like kind of where he is are the things that are most concerning. And so I don't know that he's somebody that you invest a draft pick in, but if he's there as an undrafted free agent, he could be a guy that comes in and is like a Brett Hundley, not a Brent Huntley, the guy from Snoop Huntley from Baltimore. I'm talking about the guy that came in from the Green Bay Packers. He spent a week on the Saints practice squad as well, so they could utilize him as a now I think about it, he's also a UCLA Bruin as well. They're both UCLA guys. So he could come in and be that guy that potentially like pick up some starts throughout his career and then see how he develops over time. But just a lot of question marks around him. Another guy that's a little bit interesting as a UDFA is Holton Ahlers. He's the East Carolina University quarterback, 6'2", 230 something pounds. He is a mobile guy. He's a big guy. Got a lot of attention, was the NFLPA Bowl MVP, very likely an undrafted free agent guy, but is one of those guys that like 4 years ago would have been selected because he would have been one of those Taysom Hill, Tommy Stevens, Nick Fitzgerald, goodness, types, to where like they were drafting a quarterback to actually try to get him to do something else, right? Like that's where Ahlers kind of falls in. So I'm not surprised that he's getting a lot of interest from teams and that teams are kind of meeting with him several times over. Very likely because they're curious, like, hey, would you be interested in playing a different position? Like that's kind of where Ahlers is. And then there's Lindsey Scott from Incarnate Wood, former LSU guy as well. Lindsey Scott is an interesting prospect in that like he's got some pretty exciting tools. He's a dual threat guy, but again, really undersized, 5'11", 212 pounds for his play style. Not really great in terms of what you're going to see in the NFL. Again, he's not a guy that you draft and say, okay, well, he's our day one starter, because he's very likely to go undrafted and therefore could, again, be another one of those sort of Brent Hundley guys that comes in and is a primary backup for you maybe, or is a third string guy for you. And then you look to see what he develops into over time. So, the bottom line is that like this NFL draft quarterback class is really good at the top. But then once you get beyond kind of the top 6 guys, it's not so good. It's not so good down at the bottom of that class. Now, I might eat my words saying this in, 3 years or whatever, but that's okay. Like, I'm fine with that. But if you're looking as a New Orleans Saints fan right now and saying the New Orleans Saints need to find a quality quarterback in this year's NFL draft, the day 3 guys, the undrafted guys, they're not going to do it for you. You got to go with one of the top 6, top 7 guys and hope that you get them at the right price, you get them at the right position, and you put them in the right situation in New Orleans. Coming up in tomorrow's episode, unless something dramatic happens with the New Orleans Saints, we'll finally take a little bit of a break from the quarterback conversation. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite NFL draft prospects in this year's class. Going to have a lot of fun with this one as well. He's over on the defensive side, has a lot of opportunity to be able to develop into something special in the NFL. So we'll break that down and more, get you all caught up with everything going on around the New Orleans Saints, including a further deep dive into their 2023 odds over at FanDuel as well. So I appreciate you as always for making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, go and check out our new Locked On NFL Draft Show. Damian Parson as well as Keith Sanchez absolutely tore up the first episode. Don't miss out. Go and check out the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate you as always, making me part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. And as always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. Trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.